Thank you for coming, one person watching. I hope between now and 7 p.m. British Summer Time, I will have come up with more ideas on Muslim unity. The fact that I'm not Muslim myself should give it additional interest, though I don't know how authoritative what I said will be found. I'm well aware that hardly anybody listens to me because basically people have given up. They're not really interested in ideas, and so they prefer to whinge and moan. I suppose there's something to be said for having a religion that gives you hope for the future and therefore the moral conviction to fight for a better future rather than just accepting whatever shit your government puts in your trough. So that's the purpose of having a religion. Now, I can't understand why it's apparently so difficult to understand by so many people. And then I think to myself, perhaps they do understand, they pretend not to. And this is a comment on there. What is it a comment about? Why would you understand something and pretend not to understand it? You can think of people doing that, waiters whose eye you've been trying to catch, but they're busy. They have to go to the kitchen to get something else and deal with a few more other things before they get to you. So they're going to pretend not to see you because they would rather not have to explain, like, oh, it's coming, whatever your dish is, whatever. So it would always be somebody in a inferior position, like the waiter I was telling you about, an employee or a servant deliberately ignoring orders and saying, oh, he didn't hear, he didn't receive the message, he didn't know the latest news, and therefore he didn't do what he was supposed to do, and that's why the disaster happened. So I'm really talking to people who are low status or people who want to pretend they're low status. It's sort of me. I'm just a prime minister. I'm just the minister. I have no control. Don't be asking me for um, any solutions. Nobody listens to me anyway. It's this kind of attitude that suggests that such a society is morally diseased and politically on its way out, and I'm sure nobody will deny this really. And many of you will have heard me say it many times before. What we should consider really is the purpose of Muslim unity and the form it will take and how Muslim unity could be achieved. So I think there's enough to be getting on with. I'm only thinking aloud with a lot of people who don't really think. So let's recap what would be Muslim unity is the first topic, and the second is what would Muslim unity be applied towards? What can you do with Muslim unity? And thirdly, how would you go about acquiring Muslim unity? So these are the three topics that I hope will be discussed with Khalid, who is actually a Muslim. Well, I am not, but I think as a moral and political philosopher, I am entitled to entitled to my view, and this is a subject of great importance because, well, it would be important to Muslims and the people who hate them, the Islamophobes. But is it important to non-Muslims or people who are neutral about Muslims, who don't hate them, don't love them, and don't care about them either way? So I would be thinking of countries like China or India, because India is nominally a Hindu nation, but it has a significant um, Muslim minority. Um, China too has in its empire two different Muslim peoples, the Hui and the Uyghurs. So I don't think anyone is entirely free of having concerns about Islam because it's now being seen as the alternative to liberal democracy, and obviously if you're not a liberal democracy, it would have uh, implications for your country and how the world is to be run if it's no longer run by the West, who operate under liberal democracy. Now, you will know that I promote secular Quranism, which is Sharia for non-Muslim Westerners. It's not been a great success in the sense that nobody likes it, or hardly anybody does. But there have been a few people who acknowledge that something needs to be done, and they'll support secular Quranism because they can't think of anything better. Now, after all this time, you would have thought that somebody might come up with something better than secular Quranism. Secular Quranism was first conceived of in 2009 in my blog Voice of Reason in November 2009. So people have had plenty of time to try and come up with something better, but it seems they just prefer Jewish conspiracy theories and blaming the World Economic Fund or the Chinese or the Russians or the Jews. So is Muslim unity a desirable thing? Obviously Muslims would think so. I have to think, as a Muslim, wanting Muslim unity so that Muslims will become more powerful and influential and change the world for the better. That is the basic idea. How would we know when Muslims are united? I think the answer is very simple. When they have that figure who they call a caliph. Now I know a spiritual one exists in the form of the leader of the Ahmadiyas, but most Muslims who are not Ahmadiyas, they deny the legitimacy and authority of the caliph of the Ahmadiyya community. So basically, if you want to be caliph, you'd have to be acknowledged as caliph by all the other Muslim countries. They would be called emirs, I believe. I think that's how it goes. So it would be Well, the parallels to Christianity is as follows. In Europe, there would be many Christian kingdoms. Before the Protestant Reformation, and these Christian kings would submit to the authority of the Pope, who would advise them on matters of morality and politics. And this only worked for a while, because as you can imagine, in a dog-eat-dog world, nobody is going to accept forever the moral authority of a man that they do not regard as divine. So while initially barbarian European kings would be awed by the persona of the Pope and his position and the power of Roman Catholicism, because the identity of being Roman is associated with empire and war and conquest, and all the European kingdoms that became Christianized had been subject to Roman invasions and Roman conquests. So you would expect them to be impressed by the religion of Rome. If you were a barbarian king who could barely read or write, you would be awed by anything that came out of the eternal city that is Rome. You would know in your barbarian way that Rome was the center of civilization, the center of European civilization, and you're not going to we're not going to argue with that, shall we say, until perhaps a few generations later, when your descendants who have been educated, learned Latin and Greek, and a bit of Roman history, they would then start having ideas of their own. In any case, the Wars of the Reformation was quite a few hundred years ago, and no new religion has really permeated Europe. They have thrown off Christianity with their revolutions, but they haven't actually adopted a new one that would fill the God-sized hole that appeared when they no longer believed in God. Now, when was it? Of course, you can't say, all Britons, all French people, believed and then they stopped believing. There would only be, we can only be talking about percentages in theory, and of course in practice we will never really know what people who died really thought of their religion. But I think we can safely deduce that there would be those who believed and there would be those who didn't, and their objections, if they ever wrote it down, would be lost if they wrote letters or diaries, because in those times they wouldn't have social media and even in the fullness of time, our postings on our blogs and social media accounts will in time be lost. So a hard copy is important. I have written a book and it's available on Amazon, and you can possess it and turn its pages, and that will make the idea more concrete in your mind as you hold the book in your hands. Now, since I write a book on a new moral and legal political system based on the Quran, you would not be surprised to know that, on the whole, I think, not on the whole, I do think that we should be grateful that we have a solution to hand, even if most people are morally and intellectually crippled by their Islamophobia. So, a measure of Muslim unity would be the existence of a caliph. Now, a caliph would be basically the most powerful nation of all Islamic nations. So while different nations would be ruled by a sultan who was Muslim, it was clear it is obvious that the most powerful of them wouldn't just be called a sultan; he'd be called um, the caliph. And now I know you're going to ask me about an emir. What's the difference between an emir and a sultan? I believe the answer is this: that the sultan is basically a ruler who happens to be Muslim. But the caliph would be supposedly governing his empire according to Quranic principles. It is my contention that the reasons why these caliphates fell was because they didn't really follow their rules. So, while this may seem shocking to many people, the fact is that people often have official handbooks and they don't follow those rules, either because some kind of practice evolved of not really following it, or people not knowing what the rules are and not bothering to look them up, or, well, I think some of you might have heard the expression more. It's a Shakespearean phrase as well, and I've said it before, I can't offhand remember it. More honoured in the breach than the observance. So it's a rule that people mostly break rather than observe. So I think we can think of, examples of this, such as manners. They do change, don't they? I mean, there would be a time when, X was always done, and then eventually it stopped being done, and then a new thing. A new thing, a new practice would evolve. Muslim unity then would take this form. There would be a caliph, and therefore, there would be the most powerful Muslim nation in the world, which would always also be an empire, and this would be a sign of Muslim status. I mean, it really is as simple as that. So perhaps there's no need to belabor this point. How can this come about, though? Obviously, the aspiration is there in certain Muslim groups, such as Hizb ut-Tahrir, who see the caliphate as a solution to their problems in Pakistan. And some of them have been saying that democracy hasn't served Muslims well, and they would prefer a caliphate. And this explains why Hizb ut-Tahrir is banned or not quite banned. We're not really clear, but certainly if you're Hizb ut-Tahrir in Pakistan, where uh, where the which is the intended destination of the caliphate, you'll see why the Pakistani government don't want it there, because it operates as a Western vassal state, still nominally operating on representative democracy. You will notice that Hizb ut-Tahrir are mostly Pakistani, and they're not asking for Turkey to become a caliphate, because the last caliphate was the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkey, and Turkey is now secular. Pakistan is therefore the most needy Muslim country for Quranic principles of governance. But it has been forced, more or less, to operate on a representative democracy. And this, I believe, is what Hizb ut-Tahrir are challenging and questioning. And they're not the only ones. Or I'm one of those people who are saying and am making a point of saying that liberal democracy has delighted us for quite long enough. I know there are people who can't quite bring themselves to acknowledge this and will be accusing me of being a commie and a fascist and a Nazi for wanting to take out representative democracy with the trash. But it really isn't working anymore. And when you are reduced to having to steal an election just to make it appear that you have won, then you're really on your way out. So Muslim unity, okay, really the flesh and bones of this idea is how to acquire Muslim unity and how would the world be organized under Muslim unity. If I were the directing force, or okay, if everyone listened to me, if Muslims listened to me and were eager for me to tell them how to go about acquiring Muslim unity, what would I say to them? That's really the best way of expressing it, I suppose. So I would tell them all to support, and guess what? Secular Quranism. And so Muslims in every country in the world would be pushing for being governed as a one-party theocracy. And once you have once you have global secular Quranism, then obviously the most powerful Muslim country would emerge, and that Muslim country would become the caliphate. So at the moment we're thinking of what four powerful countries. It would be obviously America, then Russia, then China, then India, and Iran. So there would be really five powerful rival empires. And I'm not going to be predicting who's going to be the most powerful caliphate if it were ever the case that all these five countries would be competing with each other in peaceful and legal ways and Islamic ways, it is hoped, to acquire this prestigious position of being the caliphate. So there's quite a lot of way to go towards this Islamic destination, this global Islamic destination. But it can start with Western countries adopting secular Quranism with their um, national characteristics and interpreting it, in interpreting Quranic principles according to their um, legal traditions. And when when it is done, there will be a clear winner, a clearly more powerful country, and obviously this idea is to make non-Muslim nations Muslim. So this is what I think we will be discussing, and perhaps I will have more ideas. Hello, Khalid. Thanks for listening. I actually have a bit of a sore throat. Um, it's been hanging around for a few days now. Yes, thank you, Khalid, for mentioning that Carol, who has called herself the Caliph of the US, um, has done quite a few excellent readings of my book and has made it fun. Yes, look forward to talking to you, Khalid, later. Erdogan seems to like to play the opportunist. What do you mean by that? He's being opportunistic in what way? I mean, we should all be opportunists, shouldn't we? We should be opening our eyes to opportunities, and obviously, trying to be ready to seize them and all that. That's to be expected of any politician. I don't see why it's to be regarded as some sort of criticism or defect. Yes, I should be better later. So it's when you're talking slowly, all these little things become more noticeable. So that's all I want to say. Thank you all for coming by. I'll try and get a few more new ideas later.